welcome to Tales from the Shed. And today,
Yeah, because do you know what? She's been on holiday
and
in her boat,
in a boat,
sailing.
sailing.
So we kind of thought, because I think I find it interesting because I'm not a sailor in any way. I mean, in fact, I think there were times that I've been sailing with my sister where something always happens. So I think they would rather I didn't go on the boat.
Oh, you're a Jonah.
A bit of that.
Never
yeah,
let women on a boat. You know the saying.
But she's a skipper. She's got it anyway. So I think that it's always interesting to me because I see, and the stories you've told me, like, because you've done a lot of sailing. She's been out in the middle of nowhere where you can't see land, and then but that's not the kind of sailing you've been doing the last fortnight, is it?
No.
So we just want to talk about sailing, and does that show us any lessons or not?
Maybe not.
Don't buy a boat might be the lesson.
But yeah, it's a weird thing because I've always been seasick, and yet I've been sailing for I'm a lot older than I think I am. Probably about 40 years.
Wow.
So I've been sailing, and as I said, we went away for a year on a boat. We went to the Mediterranean. I've sailed the Bay of Biscay. I've gone across. Haven't done transatlantic, and I've always been seasick. And even when I lived for a year on a boat and did all of these big 5-day, 6-day sails, people say you get used to it, but I never have. I'm less seasick than I was, but I'm always got nausea and things. So why do I do it? And I find it really, I wish I could come up with like a nice simple answer, but there's something about the freedom, and there's something about the openness, the eye on the horizon. And I will always remember sailing the Biscay. Then we went all the way down the outside of Portugal, and we stayed about 20 miles off because of the tunny nets. They have huge tunny nets that are dangerous, and factory ships that can take you down. And we stayed off, and the last bit where we come round into Gibraltar, it wasn't that far, but the wind wasn't great, and we spent probably about 3 days, and there was nothing, and we just looked at the horizon right across the Atlantic. The land was probably about 6-7 miles off because you could just see land, and we just watched the sun go down, and then we sail with nothing, and then you watch the sun come up. Nothing's changed. Then you watch the sun go down, and it was kind of magical. There's a kind of real essence of living in a world where no one else is, an essence of living where there's no routine, and you live by the tides and by the wind, so you don't know the days of the week or what's happening. So you're very much with nature.
Wow. Yeah,
really with nature, because nature's surviving, not with nature in hug a tree nature, but I have to work with nature. I don't actually care what name you give the day. I don't really care whether you give it night or day. I just have to live with and serve what is served up to me.
Yeah, because it just keeps going on. It's not interested in you.
No.
Your little pinprick on the ocean.
No.
You just have to deal with what comes up.
So they might serve you a full-sake gale, or it might serve you rain, or it might serve you something. And it's kind of just working with it. You can't fight it. You have to work with it. So it's very... I don't know, because it also sounds miserable to me. It's not like I think it's great. So you are cold and you are wet and you are warm, but there's something about experiencing nature firsthand without any shields or without any pattern that's stopping you from being with it.
And you have to be totally self-sufficient in a sense of you're there. Yes, if something goes wrong, you could have a mayday, but there's no guarantee that anyone's going to pitch up.
Never ever, and this gets me, is I've never ever thought of anybody rescuing me. It's always been I do and I take the consequence. It's total responsibility. I don't go out thinking if this goes wrong then that. So and it's always my husband always says, oh, tall tales, you're selling tall tales, but sometimes it's like life. Your biggest experiential changes happen when something big happens. So it's not that it's always good. There's lots of very boring, very normal stuff happens. But we were sailing into Coruña, which is on the north coast of Spain, and we were coming across, and we had just done the whole of the Biscay, and we only carried 7 gallons of water. and which is not very much. And we've been living for 7 days. So that's for cooking, washing, everything, 7 gallons of water. And we'd been sailing for 5 days and nights constantly. And because we were stupid, we didn't start the engine, we didn't keep the engine, we just sailed. Right. And so when we went to start the engine, the battery was flat. So we're coming into Coruña, and it had been blowing an 8 and a 9 for 2 days. And the Atlantic rollers were huge. And the wind was right against us. And we just couldn't get to Coruña. And we'd had run out of food the day before, had no water. And all we could do was sail 90 degrees to the wind, backwards and forwards. And we did an hour tack each way. We did it on a clock, backwards and forwards. And after about 36 hours, wind gradually came round, and then we could just gradually sail. And we had to get into Coruña. We had no engine. We had no map of Coruña. But it didn't strike me that anyone else should or would. So it was like, this is my choice.
So you cocked up, in a sense.
We'd cocked up, absolutely. Yeah, we'd got to that point. We were lack of experience and so on. So we sailed, and it was just like, it was a real, I have to trust to, I'm going to call it God, and I'm not religious and I don't believe in a God, but into the universe, I'm just going to trust to what is there, and I'm going to work with it. And we'll just see whether we can pick up a boat, or we can pick up a something, or we can drop an anchor, or if there's something we can do. And we went in, and there happened to be mooring buoys there. And we were used to picking up a mooring buoy without an engine. So we just hooked the mooring buoy, stopped, and it was like, we have arrived. It was just like this terror. But we've always taken responsibility. And I think it's interesting analogy with life, that you take responsibility.
Yeah.
I didn't think, oh, this doesn't feel great, and I thought I'd be in for dinner, and I'm a bit peckish, I think I'll call the RNLI. It was like, well, we don't have food, but nobody dies of lack of food for 24 hours.
Yeah.
Nobody dies of this, and you think, right, I'm down to my last gallon of water, I'm certainly not going to have a shower. Do you know?
Yes. Yeah, it might be a teaspoon that you rub over yourself.
But it's like we kind of live with it. So I think it's this sort of complete self-sufficient different approach. Nice.
It's interesting. My husband's got some friends, and they were transatlantic, and something happened, you know, where they just, I don't know, they might have lost the engine, they might have lost the mast or something like that. And luckily there was a boat nearby that stopped to pick them up, but it was a container ship.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what happened was, so this thing kind of comes alongside, and they said, so they're down here, and there's this thing up there,
block of flats.
And the only the kind of the rope ladder only went so far, so they had to wait for the wave to come up. They could grab the end of the ladder, and then the boat would fall away.
That's it. Yeah.
And they both managed to get on this thing, and then essentially the boat
just went away,
was just left. Lost. Because they couldn't do anything about it.
No.
And just to kind of think about that experience, that everything you had
is on
was
the boat.
Was just gone.
Was just gone.
And you to get you on the super tanker was like really amazing, you know. But just kind of thinking, but then they just had to do that. If you wanted to survive, that was how you did it.
Yes.
You know? And they were lucky that there was a boat coming.
And there was lucky. And but if there isn't, you do, you know, people do that.
I mean Atlantic, really.
But really, my holiday was not that. My holiday was just going around the coast. It was
lovely.
But it's still got that essence of, and I think once you've had a thrill or you've done something, it's not always people wish it on me because they want to deflect it, and they say, don't you want to do that again? Don't you want to go around the world? Don't you want to cross the Atlantic? And I went, no, because I quite like the restaurant and the wine at the restaurant and a pizza and things like that.
You can go into a nice marina, and then you can nip along for your rockfish.
So, and though I love sailing, it's still, you can still experience that a mile off the coast and do that. But it's almost like the best of both worlds, because we can stop at Salcombe and have a swim in a paddleboard. And then pop in and get fish and chips and then pop out again. So you kind of experience those two worlds. And I've only been to Salcombe a couple of times by road with you. Every time I go to Salcombe, and I've been there a lot, is by boat.
Yeah.
And it was a very different place going by road. It was like, this is weird. I didn't recognize it.
Yeah, it's like when we lived in Boston, it's interesting because that is a different city from the sea. So we went out on a couple of things where you do whale watching, but there's also a ferry that goes across to Provincetown, and it was that thing of coming back into Boston and you see the seafront. I mean, it's a port. It's meant to be arrived at by sea, Boston.
Yeah.
All the stuff that's built up and all of the the things.
It's a result of the port.
Yeah. But it's because people go into that and you just see how amazing it is to arrive at the sea.
Yeah. So this is exactly what we find is when we go to somewhere by sea, it feels different, and it's almost looking at life from another perspective, which is another kind of Zoom chat. But it is that other perspective of seeing life and loving it. But we did have a lovely time, and we did spend time in the marina, and a seal came up and welcomed us into the marina. We were sitting on the boat on our second bottle of wine, and the dolphins went past the end of the boat in the marina. This whole lot of dolphins went past, and on the way back we saw a seal in the middle of the sea in the bay, Bigbury Bay, and it was there and it was eating a fish.
Well, of course, that's what they do.
And it was holding it, taking a bite off of it, but it had to put the fish down for a minute to take the bite, and then the seagulls were trying to nick the fish, and we watched this for ages, and you think, just us in our space. How special was that?
Brilliant. Well, so there we go, guys. If you want to experience, life in the now, total responsibility, all these other amazing, maybe you should take up sailing. Or borrow a boat to the first stage.
Borrow a boat, definitely.